Hello, this is JJ back from Paranormal Talks, paranormaltalks.com. We're an educational organization around the paranormal, the supernatural, and other woo-woo stuff. That huge bunch of information that's all around you that our society ignores. But it really impacts us. And it's good to know about. So this is the third video for predictive content. And this person, as I said, I choose each person based on their accuracy and their track record of accuracy. Because I want to give you good stuff, valuable stuff, valid stuff that you can use for your knowledge and your planning purposes. By the way, some of this stuff may not agree with your current politics or philosophy or things like that. And if so, turn off the video now, because if you get upset, that may not be so good. So I'm just being thoughtful of you, just so you know. Okay, so this video is about Penny Kelly. Now, Penny Kelly, she's quite an interesting person, and I'll be talking about her latest prediction, which is titled this: World Update from Penny Kelly, Part 1. And you can see this on YouTube. And there's the name of the channel, which I can't pronounce. It has a lot of A's in it. And it ends in rows. Okay? And here's a screenshot of Penny Kelly in her interview. Oh, yeah. And there was another interview done, conducted by Realist News, which has a YouTube channel, of Penny Kelly. And that interview happened in January of 2019. And that's where I pull a lot of the information from. So let me give you a background on Penny Kelly and why she is accurate in her predictions for the United States in particular, and what's coming up for us politically and economically. Now, Penny Kelly goes way back. She was an assistant to Dr. Levengood, you know, the gentleman in England who studied and analyzed and came up with hard facts of the crop circles appearing and happening in England. Well, Dr. Levengood scientifically and empirically studied all of these crop circles in England. And Penny Kelly, for herself, aside from the crop circles, she is all about consciousness, you know, our own mental human consciousness. And she's a science and a researcher. Now, Dr. Levengood, who she was an assistant to, he was a botanist and a biologist. And his thing was dealing with food crops and seed yields, which crop circles enhanced exponentially. And that's scientifically and empirically proven in the laboratory of Dr. Levengood. Now, Penny Kelly worked with Dr. Levengood for 15 years, and they studied plasma, what it is, what it is not, and how it comes from spacecrafts. Plasma, as with all energy, is how it makes life work, and it leaves a signature. So she has quite a deep technical, scientific background and a spiritual, supernatural background. Now, she wrote a book based on the information she receives from this group of guides called robes. And she wrote a book, Change, that states that change is not for the faint of heart. And she authored this book in 1999. And the title of the book is Robes. The book tells of global dimensions of the next century And as it always is with change, the book's description of the coming changes are startling, comforting, enlightening, and unnerving. You got that right. Based on what the astrologers, what I've shared already with the astrologers, their predictions, and with Martin Armstrong, and the predictions from his computer system, which he calls Socrates. So the book Robes details the coming changes in nations and governments, as well as the rise of business to power. Now remember in the last video with Martin Armstrong, he showed the cycles of business, which is the private sector, and then of government. And these cycles ebb and flow from one to the other. So we are moving into the rise of business to power. And the power of government is collapsing. That's what we're seeing. That's why it's so uncomfortable. You know, government's kind of been like a mommy and daddy to us, taking care of us, because government cares for us. It takes care of us. Sort of. And to see the collapse of your mommy and daddy can be quite upsetting. But this book expands to examine everything from education and population, wars, weather, food, famine, including the emerging human potential embedded in the body-mind system. Now, this is a quote from the Robes, these higher frequency beings that state, the most important thing for you to remember as you look at these coming changes is that things could be so much easier if you understood why these things are happening, and if you worked with them instead of against them. And astrologers say the same thing. The planets have their planetary cycles that bring change to us, relentless change, whether we like it or not, whether we resist it or not. So understanding what astrology can teach us helps us understand what that change is for, so we can cooperate and get the most out of it. I know, change is very scary, isn't it? I know. If you've worked in corporate America, you know that change is very scary. If a division or a department is reorganized, woohoo, that's change. And it's scary. So Penny Kelly advanced in consciousness with a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. And that's not unusual with humanity and certain individuals. Walking between the worlds. That's what a Kundalini awakening does for you. Intuition training, she's also undergone, and how to survive and build a new future. Changes are much more dramatic in the next 2 to 3 years. So are you getting it here? The first two videos, the one on astrology and the one from Martin Armstrong, had certain major threads, and Penny Kelly is picking up the same thing. So we are coming into some really big changes in the next 2 to 3 years. That's the years 2020 through 2021, and I'm sure even beyond. We will not crash financially until about 2020, the year 2020. And in that year, we just limp along. Now, climate changes will be culminating over 12 years. And the Robes, when they come to her and talk, she's kind of a channel in that way. They indicate that we are too dependent on government, that we must take responsibility of ourselves. Here we go again. There's an upcoming breakup of the United States all along the west, south, and east coasts. Now, this will be touched upon also in one of the last videos of the 6 that I'm doing. Martin Armstrong is also already indicated in the year 2036, in the year 2032, the beginning of the breakup of the United States as we know it, and it will be reconfigured into something different. Well, here we go again with these Robes, these high-frequency beings, indicating that there's a coming breakup of the United States along the west, south, and east coast. The breakup is political and financial. And interestingly, the visits of the robes began occurring for Penny Kelly in 1980, where she said that, so she got this stuff in already in 1980. She didn't get it just last year or even this year, even though she reported on it in the interview in 2019 of this year. But by 2020, people will use digital assets as money. You know, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies. Also, biological terrorism will be used against us. About the same time, people, and Martin Armstrong's Socrates computer system also shows a biological plague also hitting our nation. So stay healthy. So people should begin to teach their children from home to protect them from the school epidemics and much more. Penny Kelly was saying these things when there was no frame of reference for them. So she was saying these things and writing these things in the 1980s. And if you have school-age children who go to grade school and high school and those types of things, especially grade school, man, do they pick up bugs and bring them home, and then you get sick. And this, I mean, going to a school, sending your child to a school when this might be happening, that's pretty scary for your child. Okay, and then in 1981 and 82, Penny Kelly was shown by the robes an unavoidable national consciousness and environmental destruction, and that we've not had on this planet before. And the environmental destruction is not able to support the current population. And this is an environmental crisis that comes down to areas protecting, who need to protect their resources for their people and not others outside their areas. And this is around the food production area. Protect your food sources, greenhouses. Now, the breakup of the United States is partially due to the current 2017 to 2020 administration. This administration is the hairbringer of the breakup and the collapse of the United States as we know it. It is time. The astrologers indicated it too with the planet Pluto. So it doesn't matter what administration. This is time for this country. What was shown to Penny Kelly by the robes is we have a setup, and we must kiss the frog to get our prince. We have to elect him because he represents the trigger, the awakener, to bring about the change in consciousness, which is really uncomfortable, isn't it? And you can't stop it. Change is uncomfortable. So this change in consciousness is to bring us to maturing spiritually and taking responsibility for ourselves. Not asking the government to do it for us, but doing it ourselves and not depend on the government. The current leaders around the world, not just in our country, but around the world, triggers these deep convictions. So the men in robes, we move towards self-responsibility, and we keep our democracy. It is a maturation process, phase for humanity. It's like adolescence. When you're 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, and you get to be 17, 18, and then it's time to leave the nest. It's time to mature. It's time to step out. That's a maturation process. You can't live in the nest with mommy and daddy your entire life. Well, maybe some of us can. I know some people who can, but I don't care about that. It's about maturing as humanity, growing up and taking responsibility for ourselves. Now, these same issues are global for mankind. If you take a look at South America, if you take a look at Europe, they're going through the same thing. They're in a lot of pain, a lot of rioting. I mean, they're ahead of the curve. It's happening to them first. So keep an eye on Europe, South America also, because it begins happening on the fringes first. And then it works into the core. And the United States is the core. So pay attention what's going on in Venezuela, in Brazil, in France, in Germany, in England, especially England, because it will reach our shores also. That's the pattern. Can't get away from it. So this incredible revolution is going on in these countries that I mentioned. France is revolting about their taxes. We will too. We'll get there too. And this is true for all countries who are now revolting. It's really about the taxes and the money, the economy. So you can find this information online. I mean, there's lots of report. If you just Google Penny Kelly, the X22 report, the Neon report, these are all in-depth reports that show what goes on behind the scene and what's not seen on the old TV press. Now, in the book, and the robes say that the alien disclosure is not coming from government. It never will. And it won't. That's not what they do. They don't help us with that. That's not their job. It's up to us. Alien disclosure will not come from the government. You don't need government to do this for us as people, as individuals. We need to take responsibility for this. In fact, each nation must keep in place the positive and the negative and mature, and then we can use and work with the frequencies. Until then, we have it pretty rough. So, the physical reality system is a learning system. That's what the robes say. That's why it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable being in these flesh human bodies. So, next, the robes say, there is a dissolution, an implosion of the Washington, D.C. area. People are leaving the D.C. area, and it's difficult. And she's shown that she's not sure if she sees if we can put the country back together again. But there's another video, the last one, that indicates otherwise. But the robes say that Washington State and Oregon and California break away to become their own political entity. You see, this is the breakup of the United States. Martin Armstrong indicated by his Socrates computer system that the breakup of the United States begins in 2032. Well, Penny Kelly adds some details to this, and the robes, the high frequency guides, say that the state of Washington, Oregon, and California break away to become their own political entity, their own country, so to speak, and that the coasts, all the coastal states, break away politically. And then Washington, D.C., as in D.C., moves to the center of the country because that is where most of the support is for the capital. So the new capital, it sounds like, moves to the center of the country. And the states all around the coast, the West Coast, the South Coast, the East Coast, they all form their own countries, so to speak. And we'll hear about that some more in the last video. So this is not new, but she was getting these in 1980 through the robes, the higher frequency beings. And when Washington, D.C. moves to the center of the country, and I look to see what exactly is the center of the country, and it actually falls kind of in Omaha, Nebraska. That's the biggest city in the center, the geographical, physical center of the country. If you measure east and west and north and south, it's Omaha, Nebraska is the center of the country. So it moves there. But Washington, the new capital, Washington, D.C., which is not Washington anymore, it's probably Nebraska, Omaha, capital, is they keep the state of Michigan. Now, why do they keep the state of Michigan? Because they need a major port, where the boats come and go. Because all the states around the edges have all these ports. Now, it's interesting that she said this in January of, during the interview in January of 2019, where she got this information in the 1980s, is President Trump actually announced that there was this big plan, this big project to redo the ports on Lake Superior. That it had been on the to-do list of many presidential administrations, and nothing had been done about it. But now he's funding it. He's asking for funding for it, and those ports will be opened up, refurbished, and they'll be fully functional and a lot of activities in and out of those ports. Now that's quite an interesting coincidence. And it'll be a port in Michigan. So you see the parallels going on here. So the new Washington will be a whole new structure. We will figure out how to govern ourselves. Government appeals to the worst, most debased elements of mankind. This has always been, but now has become rampant because we've reached the peak of this corrupt cycle. People of the elite are having lessons now and feeling sad and panicked. The U.S. mainstream propaganda media is tearing the United States apart. So the breakup of the United States, the deep state gets some of what they want. They get to split off the states and form their own countries. So they'll get what they want. They want to break up the big nations so no one is there to stop them. The young 20 to 30-year-olds today in the U.S., they think differently and will take care of each other better. So future programs will sound socialist, socialist Marxist, but of a real caring type of program. A few men who are wealthy are allowed to accumulate massive amounts of wealth, and many of us are hungry and cold, which is not so good. But this will change drastically over the next 10 years. That's from the years 2019 to 2029. So these uber wealthy people will be told to distribute their wealth or be prosecuted and executed. These men are deeply involved in treason too, and they are confronted as they've never been confronted before. So capitalism takes a big hit. It fades. People like to have their own ownership of capital and wealth. If you work, you sweat, you get tired, you want to be compensated for that. Otherwise, why work? Why sweat? Why? So you want to keep your capital, your wealth. We now are at a point of deep awareness that involves money, and thinking changes around capitalism. So cryptocurrencies will probably come to the forefront. So our monetary system is changing. So that's from Penny Kelly. from her robes, her high frequency beings who have shared the future of the United States. So you can see some real common threads running through the astrology video, the Martin Armstrong video from his computer system, not Martin, but the computer system, and Penny Kelly's robes. So that's her method of getting this information. So that's the third predictive content video. There's more to come. 3 more. Stay tuned. And this is JJ from Paranormal Talks. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.